If you need to scale it, it has to be sustainable.
Being wasteful is not good for business.
It's also about building trust.
In terms of energy usage or heat reusage that we do, I think we have a good story to tell.
What is usually not clearly communicated is that it's liquid cooling, but it's a closed loop.
What does it mean or take to build sustainably? Sustainability can feel a bit abstract if there is no context. We can talk about numbers, we can talk about specific cases, but there is way more to that, such as decisions, judgments, trade-offs. And what I would like to talk about today is these invisible choices. With us is Danila Shtan, Chief Technology Officer, Tom Blackwell, Chief Communications Officer, and Andrey Korolenko, Chief Infrastructure and Product Officer. Andrey, actually, let me start with you. You've been building infrastructure for almost 3 decades. That's impressive. And the question is, how does it feel for you that what you do now is at the center of all the AI debates?
Basically, this is not something new, what's happening. It's the pace, which is very different from what happened before in the history. There were a few technological shifts in the past that comes to mind is probably steam engine, and then internet, and then what's going on with the AI. To fully benefit from the new technology, you need to build infrastructure, you need to build factories, all the supply chain, train the people, etc. But infrastructure is extremely important for all of these 3 technologies. For steam engine, it took probably several decades or a century. For the internet, it took probably 2 or 3 decades. It started as small in 1980, whatever, as ARPA. And the pace of AI is that the same shift will happen in probably 5 to 10 years. So it's just, it's not something that is challenging by itself, but the pace and the scale is what brings the huge challenge.
Dan, let me come to you with this, because I personally feel that the more companies are building AI, building infrastructure and software around AI, the higher the expectation is of them. So how do you feel about that? What do you think about that?
Well, in a sense, I want to second what Andrey said, right? So this whole AI revolution, or whatever other term you use, it's a huge one. I'd say that humanity haven't seen anything of that scale for at least 100 years in terms of how it changes basically everything you touch, every industry, every household. And if that is true, and I assume it is, and I guess we all work under the assumption that it is, the infrastructure and the layer that supports it should be extremely reliable. We are talking systems that will support major business decisions at a scale we haven't seen before. So in a sense, it adds some scrutiny to everything we do.
Tom, building AI takes more than building technology. It's also about building trust with communities, trust with investors. And from your experience, how does a company earn this trust?
Well, I mean, so first of all, none of this happens overnight. This is a very new industry, and it's an industry that actually most people looking at it from the outside don't understand very well. And there are a lot of questions. I'd say a lot of questions to the industry, and they're all very valid questions. But when it comes to that trust, as I said, first of all, this is a process. And we started Nebius only a couple of years ago. And so we're still early in this journey of explaining to people. But what we find is that, first of all, you have to have the substance, right? So if this becomes a blah, blah, blah game, then you're never going to win that game. And I think that, we benefit from the fact that Andrey and his team are really good at building. They're extremely efficient in how they build. If you look at some of the metrics in terms of energy usage or heat reusage that we do, I think we have a good story to tell. But having the substance alone isn't enough, and we find that we're continually having to answer questions and tell that story. So anytime we come into a new region, a new country, or a new state, there are lots of questions to be asked. And I think that how we answer them, how openly answer them, and then how we're able to consistently answer them and demonstrate them through substance will be part of that trust.
Actually, Andrey, when Tom says that the story and the substance have to match, does it put a lot of pressure on your team?
Yep.
Sorry.
All right.
Thank you.
All right. So, Tom, you also mentioned that there is a lot being misunderstood or not understood completely about the build-outs and what this industry is about, how it's been progressing. So maybe let's focus on this now. What do you think is the first thing that is being misunderstood about how we build?
Look, first of all, I think that there is maybe you have lots of different companies that are involved in this build out at different stages or do different parts of it. And I think that maybe one misunderstanding is putting everybody in the same box. And so I think it's probably important to be able to have a more nuanced view of who does what and how and so on, when we're not actually all the same. But also, as I say, because this is such a new industry and so many of these questions are coming up for the first time, they're quite emotional questions, actually. So if you live in a community and you see some gigantic building coming up and you're hearing that, you know, the water's going to disappear or your electricity bill is going to go through the roof, well, that's enough to make anyone nervous, actually. But the reality is it's not always like that. And I think that's, again, that comes down to the onus is on the players in the industry to be properly communicating what they're doing, how they're doing, and what the impact is, and also openly addressing the challenges. I think we at Nebius, I think, would quite good, we're reasonably good at this in that when we come into a new region or we're looking at a new site, we're actually open about who we are. We don't try and hide behind confidentiality clauses. So we come in, we actually go to town hall meetings and we show up and explain who we are and try and address the questions that are on people's minds. I think it's important to do that.
Andrey, do you feel like the same as Tom about what's being misunderstood?
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with Tom, but just the word sustainability is often refers to the energy sustainability, but at the same time, you have the same need for the sustainability in any process that you have to scale. If you need to build it, if you need to scale it, it has to be sustainable by itself. So it has to be simple. It has to be scalable. It has to be integrated in the environment where you actually scale, build it, operate it, and so on and so forth. So sustainability from the very different angles with the very different aspects is indeed important. Otherwise, you cannot scale and operate it going forward.
Mm-hmm. Dan, what about you? Do you feel the same?
Yep.
Anything from the perspective of actually building the software on top that optimizes how the infrastructure is being used? I think like you have a lot of questions that you need to solve also about like what actually needs to live on top of the infrastructure. So we get to the point where efficiency is maximized. So I'm just interested to hear your point of view here.
In a sense, sustainability and efficiency go hand by hand, right? And at the scale that the modern AI infrastructure operates, usually this efficiency immediately becomes business efficiency and revenues, etc. So in a sense, this is a win-win-win-win-win game for everyone involved, right? The communities, for us as a business, for environment, etc., etc., etc. So essentially, Andrey and his team provide the capacity, right? Mm-hmm. They build these huge facilities, they secure these contracts, they bring the hardware, they build out the internal hardware design, etc., etc., etc. Then comes the software layer, when you need to fit as much as you possibly can in a very limited footprint. And you don't want to waste those compute cycles. You don't want to waste that time when like the GPUs are running at peak power and not actually doing anything. So this is the whole goal. This is good for electricity bill, which is good for business.
And in terms of like working together, what kind of inputs do you need from Andrey's team on a consistent basis?
Oh, everything. So Andrey and his team basically determine how will we live for the next like half a year to 3 years, depending on the current situation. So they provide the limits, they provide the insights into what the hardware will look like, what's the next generation, because of their special relationship with all the market, right? And that kind of shows us what's the path forward. Without that information, we would just go in blindly and spend a lot of time optimizing for what we don't know. Right? At the same time, the way they design the hardware, for example, empowers some of the scenarios that wouldn't be available on the hardware that you can procure in the market. Right? And at the same time, when we see that we don't need to over-provision, or we can remove some of the components or some part of the infrastructure for the lighter workloads, we communicate it back and we find another design that is more lightweight, more suitable for the task. Because in a sense, it's always a game of finding the most suitable platform for the particular task.
Andrey, how does this inform your work on a daily basis?
What is very important about us is that we build from the ground up, and the more we integrate it through the stack, the more we optimize through the whole stack, the more value we bring. The more value we bring, the more successful we are. And at the same time, the more sustainable, by the way, from different perspectives. So basically at Office, we live for each other. So there's also a GTM team, marketing team, everyone, actually. The whole company, when you're building the stack, you're not just making one specific solution. When you're building a solution for the wide variety of the customers, wide variety of the different businesses, and so on and so forth, you're always trying to optimize the whole solution, not the one specific part. Obviously, there are values that is always with you. You have to build reliably, and again, build, run, develop, whatever else. You have to build it reliably, efficiently. Again, ability to scale, alignment with the whole environment that consists business environment, community environment, I don't know, energy, whatever. You have to be aligned with what surrounds you, because the scale of the project's huge, the impact is huge, the business impact is huge. So you don't want to risk and do something very specific, and almost all the efforts that you can put in to make it better pays back immediately. You have a very high pragmatic motivation actually to do better.
How about we actually discuss a trade-off situation? So this is something that we discussed internally quite a lot, and we are challenged on this. So AI demand is growing fast, and also including in the regions where the energy mix is not yet where we would want it to be. So do you go in, do you build, or do you prefer to kind of stay out and go into the region with, let's say, cleaner energy? How would you think about it? Andrey, we can start with you.
These decisions are usually not black and white. So it's not stay out or go in. It's also when you define the scale that you go in or you stay out. So when, for example, Nordic countries, they have a lot of renewable energy. So we obviously like to work there and want to be there, because everything is aligned again for us to develop. In some other places, it's way more challenging. We don't brute force that. To be honest, we want to be everywhere in the world, but the priority is to be where is the demand, but also the opportunity to deliver. It kind of has to be aligned.
Tom, is it how the market sees it as well? That this is not much of a black and white, but rather a game of manufacturers?
I think that the market would probably look at this somewhat pragmatically, in the sense that, of course, it's important, and we try and you build as efficiently as you can for all of the sensible pragmatic reasons that we've talked about. But at the same time, the market would expect you to be building where the industry is and where the demand is. So if hypothetically speaking, if you were to have a market or a geography where the AI industry was huge, but we ourselves were just going to stay away from it, I don't think the market would welcome that. So of course, you think pragmatically in this kind of decision making, but equally, even if you go into a region where the energy mix isn't exactly what you'd want or isn't as clean as it could be, there's still a lot that you can do in terms of how you build to build more efficiently and to create higher output. So I think that again, I would agree with the idea that it's not a go in or stay out kind of question. I think you still have to build with the industry, but you try and build better.
All right, so how about we play a little game? So you have the ping pong paddles right by your side. Andrey, you also have it. We're gonna play ping pong. The one who wins actually gets to name the new GPU. Tom, you already won this game once, so we can exactly twice. So the new Blackwell is also an option. Anyhow, so this will be our improvised voting paddles. And I will force you into two choices. So one side will mean one option, another side will mean another option. So just pick one. No, it depends. No, maybe something in the middle. We can discuss a bit later. So it's not that hard. So, ready? Okay. What would you choose? 1, red, ambition, black, discipline. And we reveal together. 1, 2, 3. All right, guys. Well, I have to pick the discipline, I guess. I mean, you guys go build, and I will be the one that explains that everything you build is actually built correctly. And yeah, okay, great. With discipline.
Ambition.
Yes, discipline. Okay. Second one. You can have just one. Red, access to power. Black, best talent. Wow. So does it mean that we're like super aligned or just scared to disagree with me this time?
It was taken care of. Yeah.
Okay. And the third one. Let's do the third one. Give up one forever. Red, top-notch GPU fleet. Black, sleep. Okay. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. Well, that doesn't work that way.
Remind me again, which one?
But I can trust Andrey.
You get neither. Neither GPUs.
But I can trust Andrey. I've seen his calendar, so I mean, it's already on the way. Okay, great. We're proceeding with another part of the game, which is just give a one-word answer to the question. All right, first one. What do you think is the most overused word in sustainability? Dan?
Can I say sustainability?
You can say sustainability.
But in a sense, I feel like it is, because people always talk, not always, but often talk about sustainability as something that is disconnected from the rest of what we do or from the business, etc. Well, it's not, because especially in this industry, in a sense, as we've discussed before, it's an essential part of what we do. Because if you build sustainably, simply because of the scale, it becomes effective, and because of that, it becomes like a sane business decision, which is a great thing, right? So sustainability as a separate term or whatever.
Fair enough.
But I think that actually I wouldn't be surprised if in 2 years we're not saying sustainability and that there's a new label. And I think actually, this started as ESG was 2 years ago. Now ESG feels a little bit kind of part of the past. Now it's sustainability.
So 2022.
So 2022, right? And I think one of the problems is that sometimes these discussions, they become a little bit, it's the blah blah, right? And so in some, it will have, once you reach a certain level of blah blah within the discussions, you then have to move on to a new term. So it's our job is to keep sustainability alive for 3 more years at least before we have to go to something new.
I mean, if you have to ask me, I would probably say impact, because everybody now is called impact. Everybody has some impact, but what is an impact? So I guess like what also I'm trying to do is to translate this word into the exact like what is actually happening. What do we mean by this? And labeling whatever is happening impact could be quite dangerous, because then this word doesn't feel impactful anymore, right?
We'll have to change it.
Yeah, but Andrey,
Rebrand.
you want to say something?
No,
Overused word?
no, actually, I mean, you all had a good options. I agree that, by the way, impact is a very good one. It's also there's a lot of it's not one word, but there's a lot of headlines like going green, turning green, etc. But then when you read through,
Or
there's
turning light green?
nothing impactful there.
Yeah.
Nothing really impactful
sustainable.
there. So I'm kind of pretty disappointing reads usually when if you pay attention to what exactly is written there, but it's not one word, so it doesn't work.
But just thinking about another word, what would you want to associate Nebius with? Which one word it would be, like in 5 years' time, let's say, one word to describe Nebius? I'm also thinking with you, actually.
No, actually, efficiency is a very good one. Just it's all around word.
I would say reliable. I think that we want to be known as a company, what we say we do. And if we can be reliable in that sense, then I think that it will put us in a good standing in 5 years' time.
My word would be practical. Like, not too shiny, not exaggerated, but like, reliable, sensible, efficient, everyday. Practical.
That's a great one. I was thinking consistent. Like, what we start, we continue. We just don't drop the ball. The decisions that we're making now, we foresee where we want to be with these decisions in like 5 years. We cannot, of course, tell the future, or we don't have the fortune teller, but just if we are consistent and we're building like based on certain principles, shared principles, which are being efficient, reliable also. All right, so the last question that I wanted to ask you is about what the numbers cannot tell. People will be looking at our reports, they will be seeing our numbers, but there is certainly something that's unspoken. So what is that? Andrey, do you want to start with that?
Yep. Well, I think we have a pretty good track history of what we already done in this specific field, like very practical stuff that I'm talking about the lower level of the infrastructure of the data centers now. What we've done in the past, I'm quite proud of. Just again, my favorite one, the Finnish project, where we built a hardware which could live in 42 degrees C environment, right? There's never 40 degrees C in Finland, so you never have to cool it off, right? That's one point. We had to design and build that, and that was like quite some time ago. So at that point, that was something new. So effectively, you just take outside air, pull it through all these racks, and it works. Then we've done, I believe, first in the world, the heat reuse, where we could recover probably 70+% of the used energy consumption for the compute and ship it back to the city, actually, in the district heating system. And also because it could be just ventilated through the outside air, you don't build half of the data center, you don't build cooling at all. You just have fans, you have filters and heat recovery system, and that's it. So it's so simple. There is nothing that generates much, noise or emissions or anything. And it actually uses almost 100% of the energy twice. And that was coupled with, again, this is specific for Finland, there was quite a lot of wind energy. So it was 100% powered by the energy from the wind. So you take energy from the wind, you do enormous amount of compute, and then almost like significant part of that energy you use to heat the water and actually the heating systems for the nearby city. This is kind of the example that I really liked, and I'm really proud that we did that. Then we are doing the same approach actually with the new flavors in these days for the AI build-outs as well. We are doing the heat reuse, we are doing that high temperature environment servers, etc. We also are trying to team up with the companies that are building the cleaner energy generation. So the last part, what is usually not clearly communicated, is that it's liquid cooling, but it's a closed loop. That's a very limited amount of the water that you actually need. And most of the time you cool that water just with the fans and heat exchangers using outside air. It can be from like 80% of the time to 100% of the time. You don't spend energy to cool that, just the fans, heat exchangers, and the closed loops of the water. That is sufficient in most of the places.
That's a great answer. I mean, hard to add to that, but Dan, do you want to try?
No. I can only reiterate that being wasteful is not good for business.
Yeah.
And that's why we try not to be.
I would just say that, you know, the numbers are important, but one can sometimes drown in numbers. And I think that if I were to sort of suggest what I think we need to be conveying beyond the numbers is actually, it's the kind of, what does this actually mean for me? So whether you're a customer of Nebius or investor in Nebius or a resident in a town close to where we're building, those numbers look great, but what does it mean for me? And I think that's the story we need to tell.
I would say for me, it's also important for, I guess, the whole market to understand that we don't have everything figured out, and it's quite all right. So we're a new industry, we're growing with other players, and we're learning from other players as well. So I just believe that we're learning very well, and I hope that we can show this with the numbers and with other stories, with the new announcements. Yeah. So I guess that's actually a good time to call it a day.
Yeah.
And yeah, high five. Thank you so much, Andrey, Tom, Danila, for joining us today.
Thank you.